IGN's infamous 7 out of 10 must be the most ambiguous number known to mankind at this point. So why have they been giving so many games this score, and how has their reputation plummeted so far that their reviews are being overwhelmingly disliked? And YouTube won't save you here, IGN.
And this is to go even further beyond!
For the longest time now, IGN hasn't really been taken seriously, and the scores that they give are met with, at best, unsurprised apathy, like, oh, another 7, I didn't see that one coming, or intense backlash from the collective fury of the gamers across the internet. But is it really just these scores that have driven their reputation into the ground, or is something larger at play here? To unpack all of this, I wanted to start by actually finding out if IGN is giving out 7s like their Oprah in 2004. 7, and where this perception is coming from. So I've dissected IGN's scoring system to find its myriad of issues and crunched the numbers to definitively prove if IGN is always giving out 7s. We'll get to all of that in a bit, but ultimately I've come to the conclusion that IGN's scoring system is completely pointless, but it's not for the reason that you're probably thinking. Before we dive into their broken scoring system, I wanted to quickly go over review manipulation and access journalism. And I wasn't actually going to talk about this, but given the recent Dragon Age review code situation, it seems more relevant. Now, I'm not accusing any game critics, but it would be a straight up lie to say that they don't have any incentives to review a game in a positive light. The obvious reason being is that gaming news outlets want to be in good standing with game publishers, so they have access to things like review codes, insider information, and invitations to exclusive events. And case in point is Dragon Age the Veilguard. Now, if you don't know already, EA restricted review codes for this game, only giving them to critics that they deemed worthy. And this has put all the positive reviews that came out for this game into question. What's worse is that IGN secured exclusive coverage for this game with their IGN First videos, where for a whole month they released Dragon Age videos with the developers, which is only available on their channel. Now, reviews were extremely mixed for this game, but you already can guess that IGN gave it a 9 out of 10. I haven't played Dragon Age the Veilguard, so I can't speak to its quality, but either way, this looks really bad for IGN. But it gets even worse because while researching this, I noticed that a comment on their review had suddenly disappeared. The comment from Voidox was directly addressing the conflict of interest and had almost 2,000 likes at the time. I wanted to check if the comment had actually been deleted, so I used a third-party website that could filter comments by user, and yeah, sure enough, it was gone cord. Luckily, I had a tab open that I hadn't refreshed, so I was able to retrieve it, but man, it's just another notch in the belt that's around IGN's neck at this point. And while deleting a comment doesn't necessarily make you guilty, it definitely makes you look guilty. Now, I do want to say that I think it's highly unlikely that gaming news outlets like IGN are being paid directly by publishers to give games higher scores. I just think that the legal risks don't really warrant the payoff. But having said that, publishers can influence these companies in a less blatant and more subtle way, which is by simply taking away their access to information, which is what happened with Dragon Age the Veilguard. Publishers want to sell as many games as possible, and gaming news outlets want to get as many views as possible, so obviously it's mutually beneficial for them to make sure a game is received positively. And it may even be completely unspoken, but just the threat of losing future benefits might be enough for them to put a review score up a point or two. Especially when it comes to larger publishers with lots of IP under their belt, ones that are releasing multiple games in a year. Think EA, Activision, Ubisoft. It's a you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours situation.
Funny thing about my back is that it's located on my cock.
So all I'm saying is that there are incentives on both sides for positive coverage on games, and there are discrete ways of either rewarding or punishing that coverage, and you can make of that what you will. Either way, most evidence is just circumstantial with no real hard proof, but what can't be denied is the damage this perception can do to these companies' credibility. I mean, sure, a single review can miss the mark, but when a pattern emerges, people become skeptical. They start asking questions and filling in the blanks themselves. Review manipulation is always a looming possibility, and we tend to assume the worst, for good reason. So with that out of the way, let's just take a step back and actually ask ourselves, what is the true purpose of a review? And it may seem obvious, but it's crucial to understand why these reviews are being made so we can understand and find all of their shortcomings. So here it is. A review is to inform you about a game, to aid you in making an educated decision on whether to buy that game or not. It seems simple, but it's an important distinction I wanted to make, and it's something that I want you to remember as we delve deeper into this. Alright, finally we can get to some answers. So, as mentioned before, I've crunched the numbers and tracked every single review from IGN for 2024 so far. It's graph time, baby. So does IGN give all games a 7 out of 10? No, of course not. All games is an exaggeration, but a lot of the reviews were 7 out of 10, sitting at 48 out of 150 reviews for 2024, which is the largest amount of reviews, sitting at 32%. But I wanted to filter the data because there are smaller game reviews that don't really affect the 7 out of 10 perception. So I made another graph with only well-known AAA games and indie games that blew up in 2024. And the results are similar, with the 7 out of 10 getting 38% of all the reviews. So yeah, I can sort of see why there's a perception that IGN constantly gives out 7 out of 10s, but you can see that 8 out of 10 isn't that far behind, with 40 reviews out of 150, or 27% of all reviews. And the filtered graph only accentuates the prominence of both the 7s and 8s. So statistically speaking, IGN doesn't give out 7 out of 10s as much as the meme would warrant, considering that the data shows that there are almost as many 8s as there are 7s. But let's put that to the side for one moment, because first we need to talk about the glaring issue with the distribution of the data. This graph is extremely front-loaded, with almost all the scores being on the top half. IGN's actually released a video addressing this issue, and just a side note, the fact that the discourse around the 7 out of 10 was so prominent, they felt they had to make a video called Another 7 IGN ? Is beyond hilarious, and their reasoning behind it is equally hilarious.
The reality is, there are simply far too many things coming out every day to review them all. Most are underwhelming or clearly bad, and go completely unnoticed by the vast majority of people. Given that IGN can only handle so many reviews at once, and we generally review around 1,000 things per year across all categories, we have to pick and choose which to review and which to let sail by. So why is it that the big name stuff rarely seems to score below a 7, which means good on IGN's review scale? Simply put, if something doesn't at least look like it might be great, people didn't click on it or Google it, and we probably didn't review it as a result. But if it does look great enough to pique your interest, it usually ends up being at least okay, and that's why the great majority of our reviews end up on the top half of the scale.
IGN's essentially saying that they don't review games that aren't well known, and the well-known games are at the very least okay because of the time and money that's been put into them. Now, even if that was true, the question still arises, why even have the bottom half of the scoring system if it's irrelevant? In fact, let's actually take a look at the bottom half of the scale, because this is where a big issue lies. So we've got mediocre, bad, awful, painful, and unbearable. Now, I'm sorry, but aren't these all just synonyms for the game sucks, don't play it? I mean, seriously, what is the difference between a bad game and an awful game? Unbearable and painful are so underused that there are literally no games in 2024 with this score. Now, you might argue that seeing a low score has entertainment value, but the score should be conveyed in the actual review. Show us why the game sucks. The score is just a vague summation of an opinion, not the other way around. We don't need a number to know how bad a game's bombed, because it's going to be covered extensively on the internet. Again, it all comes back to the purpose of a review and if it effectively informs or not, which this doesn't. It's just extra fluff that we don't need. And the thing is, IGN acts like, well, this is just how it is. There's nothing we can do about it, but they're the ones who create their own scoring system. They've actually changed their scoring system 3 times in the past. First, they started with a 100-point scale, then they went to a 20-point scale, and then back to a 100-point scale, and then to a 10-point scale with a decimal number. Now, congratulations, you've managed to change the scoring system without actually changing the scoring system. They're all essentially the same thing, because a 75 out of 100 is a 7.5 on the 10 scale or a 14 on the 20 scale. Then they decided to remove the decimal number, which has made it even less nuanced than it was before, and is definitely a contributing factor to the 7 out of 10 perception. The point that I'm trying to make is that IGN has the power to change it, they just don't. So I fixed it for them to reflect what their scale actually means. See, logically thinking, you would expect the middle of a scoring scale to be the average, so I condensed 1 through to 5 into one category, which is just called Don't Play out of 10, and then I renamed the rest of the scores to reflect what IGN actually means when they're giving games these scores. And after doing this, all the 7s and 8s make a lot more sense, because there are just simply a lot more average to above average games than completely arse games or amazing masterpiece 10 out of 10 games. Yay, I fixed IGN's scoring system to be more accurate and got rid of all the fluff. There we go, problem solved, right? Of course not, because there's another issue that I think overshadows all of this and is the main reason why I think their scoring system is pretty much pointless. So here it is. These game reviews come from entities, not individuals. See, the problem isn't so much the quantity of 7s, it's more about the inconsistency of the 7s. The way that we view games is influenced by many factors, by our likes and dislikes, by games we've shared with other people, by games that we grew up playing. So it's fair to say that no one person has had the same gaming journey as another. So how can any of us expect to know what a 7 means when the numerous editors at IGN can't even agree on what a 7 means? How can their reviews inform us when these standards change every time? It's just impossible to establish a baseline when that baseline is constantly shifting. Of the 150 reviews that IGN has done so far in 2024, do you know how many reviewers there were? 39 reviewers. And do you know any of them?
May I help you?
We'll be asking the questions, old man. Who are you?
You.
No, not me, you.
Yes, I am you.
Just answer the damn questions. Who are you?
I have told you.
Are you deaf?
No, you is blind.
I'm not blind, you blind.
That is what I just said.
You just said what?
I did not say what. I said you.
That's what I'm asking you.
And you is answering.
Shut up!
Now, I'm assuming a lot of these were freelancers, and granted, there were a handful of reviewers that handled most of the reviews, but the point still stands. As parasocial as it might sound, we don't know any of these people. They're just voices with no face, and names we forget as soon as they tell them to us. Think about it, have you ever heard someone say, blank from IGN gave it a 7 out of 10? Of course not, it's always IGN gave it a 7 out of 10, because these scores are represented by companies. Now, I'm not trying to hate on any of these reviewers. I bet most of them are extremely passionate about games, more than most if they're willing to pursue a career in games, but this is just the nature of large gaming news outlets. This is the reason why you see those crazy score comparisons plastered all over the internet, where IGN gave this game a number, but then for some reason they gave this game the same number. It just doesn't compute to most of us. And let's actually talk about Doom 2016, because I think it illustrates my point to a T. See, Alana Pierce, a former IGN employee, made a video about the 7 out of 10 issue, and she brought up the Doom review, which got a score of 7.1 out of 10.
Even when I worked there, they had game reviews come out that I staunchly disagreed with. When I worked there, they had the Doom 2016 review, which was written by a freelancer who gave it was like an insane low score. Yeah, it was a 7.1. For Doom 2016. And I remember like everyone in the office being like, do not fucking agree with that at all. But it was from Joe Gilroy, who did not even work in the IGN office, a total freelancer. I don't think he even wrote for IGN very often, like maybe 1 or 2 times. I'm not actually sure. But like they've certainly had review scores that I fundamentally disagreed with. And that's just sort of the reality of reviews being just written by some fucking guy.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially a random guy just walked into IGN, took a steaming shit on Doom 2016, then IGN looked at it and said, oh, it looks good, yeah, we'll upload that, it's a good idea. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having an opinion, even if it's objectively wrong.
But it doesn't really distinguish itself by recreating 25-year-old gameplay.
But you can understand the mixed messaging that we're getting, and even all the editors at IGN didn't agree with that score. This is a bit off topic, but does anyone remember that game journalist from Polygon trying to play Doom 2016? Damn, that was fucking funny. Here's another example, the Dragon Ball Sparking Zero IGN review. See, IGN was hyping this one up with the preview and all the videos leading up to the review being done by an actual Dragon Ball Z fan, someone who had played the original Budokai Tenkaichi games and seemed passionate about the subject matter.
My relatively short time with Sparking Zero rekindled my love for the Budokai Tenkaichi games and was a much needed reminder that arena fighters can excite and thrill just as much as traditional 2D and 3D fighters can.
Only for IGN to pull a bait and switch by swapping out the reviewer with someone that seemed less invested in the anime or the games, and they ended up giving it a 7 out of 10. Now look, I am the demographic for this game. I am in my 30s, I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, I have a tattoo of Goten doing the fusion dance on my back, and my brother has trunks on his. It's fucking awesome. Anyway, if I'm going to watch a review about a Dragon Ball Z game, I want it to come from someone who is as big a fan as I am and understands the previous games, and other people seem to agree. Whereas the guy who's been doing all the videos of this game in the preview, that guy talked about this game like it's a 9 out of 10. This dude's probably never watched an episode of DBZ. He couldn't get past 8 Vegeta. IGN wouldn't shut the fuck up about this game for months, and y'all gave it a 7? Because of the numerous reviewers, not only is the scoring consistent, but so is the review quality. If you miss the mark as a company whose job it is to cover new games, then your credibility comes into question. Now, this is a very general statement, but usually if a review doesn't line up with the overall public sentiment of a game, then it most likely wasn't a good review. And IGN seems to have more misses than hits. Now they're no longer informing you about a game, they're essentially doing the opposite of what a review is supposed to do, which is misinforming you, telling us that it's all sunshine and rainbows when it's really not. And this is where I think the final piece of the puzzle lies. We don't like to be told that a shit cake is actually a chocolate cake, even though we can clearly see it and smell it. There's flies buzzing around it and a piece of corn in it.
The Matrix is telling my brain that it is
inclusive and well made.
ignorance is bliss.
It's an insult to our intelligence and it pisses people off. It creates backlash and sparks the question why. Conversations arise like they must be paid off or nobody takes IGN seriously. So look, here's what it ultimately comes down to. This is about IGN's reputation. It's the amalgamation of all the things we've talked about, the potential review manipulations, their broken scoring system, the numerous reviewers that create inconsistency, and their waning credibility with their constant bad takes. But by reputation, I also mean the brand that they've built and the overall perception that they've fostered throughout the years. There's nothing wrong with giving a game a score, but this idea is baked into IGN's DNA. I mean, IGN's image is those big red hexagons with numbers on them. A score should just be frosting on the shit cake, but if that's what IGN wants to emphasize, then that's what their viewers are going to come to expect. Look, if I'm being honest, people are lazy and love distilling complex ideas and opinions into numbers.
It is a little something for
Arkham Asylum makes you feel like you're Batman.
It's easier to quickly look at a number than to understand nuances beyond just black and white. So IGN is incentivized to capitalize off appealing to the lowest common denominator. And now I think they're suffering the repercussions of emphasizing score over substance. Couple that with the consistent bad takes that are an insult to the intelligence of anyone that watches, and you have sufficient fuel to run this train off a cliff. And this has become a runaway train where everything that surrounds IGN is about a score. I feel like everyone's become way too obsessed with numbers, gamers included, and this couldn't be more evident than in IGN's reviews and comments section. IGN gave it that score. You know the one I'm talking about. If IGN gives it a 7, take 2 points away. Everyone knows the rules. A 9, huh? Are we sure the number didn't accidentally get turned upside down? Never forget, they gave Aliens Isolation a 6. Don't let this distract you from the fact that Mr. Krabs sold SpongeBob to the Flying Dutchman for 62 cents. Wait, what? The gap between an IGN 7 and an IGN 8 must be greater than Mount Everest. You know it's bad when there are comments that have more likes than the actual video. Oh, the classic 7 rating from IGN. It's their way of saying, we want to rate it less, but we don't want to piss off Disney and lose our media benefits. Concord getting a 7 is the most IGN thing ever. Can't spell ignorance without IGN. At this point, we're just so far off what a game review is supposed to do that it's just become a roasting ground for IGN. I mean, let's all be honest. None of us go to IGN to be informed about games. We go to be entertained. We go to bring popcorn and to laugh at their terrible takes and to receive validation when the top comment expresses exactly how we feel. They're caught in a vicious cycle of their own doing where every move they make, every review they make, every score they give is viewed through a magnifying glass to be scrutinized by the gaming community. So if you can't tell already, I'm not a huge fan of IGN or numbered scoring systems in general. I mean, sure, they have their place, but a number just can't convey what words can. And a lot of my critiques do apply to most of the gaming news outlets. It's just that IGN seems to be trying to speedrun their reputation suicide. So if I could finish with some advice, I would say keep watching IGN if you find it entertaining. I mean, that train's already left the station. We may as well just enjoy the ride at this point. But make sure that you're seeking out individual reviewers, listen to your friends' recommendations, and get opinions from multiple sources, ones that you agree with and disagree with, because the more informed you are, the better spent your money is. But over everything, remember that it's just a number.